Today marks the final day of the 2024 International Men's Health Week calendar. Starting at an international level in 2002 actually, there were representatives from 6 men's health organisations from around the world who met at the Second World Congress on Men's Health in Vienna, Austria, where they resolved to work together to launch International Men's Health Week. Anyway, Men's Health Week for me was inspiring, emotional, enlightening, and at times bereft of any acknowledgement and appallingly dismissed as being unnecessary. But in one of my final hurrahs on Friday morning at a construction site, Men's Health Week toolbox talk, I asked a room of around 130 men to raise their hand if they had had any experience with paternal postnatal depression. It was one of many questions I asked, by the way. One guy put up his hand. Now, I couldn't find him after the event, but received this note later in the day, and this is how it goes. Thanks so much for coming today, Rae. I'm the one who put up my hand about postnatal depression. Later in the morning, a guy who I'd never spoken to before came up to me and asked about my experience. He then told me all about his own experience, and we chatted for about 5 minutes and then went back to work. I hope he felt as good as I did afterwards. Thanks for giving me that chance to put up my hand. You are making a difference. And there's an example of the power of men supporting each other. Anyway, a few hours later, after a very enlightening phone call with Dave, he generously and courageously agreed to be interviewed live on the show and tell his story for the very first time. And here he is after that much long-winded introduction. For the first time ever on radio, I present to you Mr. Dave Bamber.
Hi, Rae. Thank you so much for having me.
How'd you go with that? Was that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, that was very well said.
Yes.
This is exciting. Yeah, my first ever live on-air experience.
Yes, I know.
I kind of feel like this must be how God would feel if he had a microphone.
Well, some would say that he does have a microphone,
yes.
really,
Awesome.
Depending on what you believe in. But
yeah, true.
That's a really, really nice way to put it. And I was excited because you didn't hesitate about coming on radio. You were very thoughtful about what you were going to speak about, though, which I really, really appreciate, because it's such an important topic. But also an important topic is where you come from, and you have come also all the way from a place in Victoria, a historic town called Cockatoo.
Yeah. It's a nice little slice of the world up in the hills.
Yeah. Now, for our international guests, they would be thinking, well, isn't that a native bird of Australia? But Cockatoo, I didn't know this until this morning at about 5 a.m, but was founded in that 1870s and named after Cockatoo Creek.
Oh, there you go.
Is the creek still there?
Yeah, there is a creek there.
Yeah.
Down at the dog park. Some people actually fish there sometimes. But there's a lot of history there. We moved there probably about a bit over 10 years ago, and we've learnt a lot about the area after moving in there. Like, the whole town was almost wiped out in the Ash Wednesday fires.
In 1983.
Yeah, exactly. And we reckon our house was definitely rebuilt after that. There's evidence of, like, tiles are always appearing on the surface of the ground, that sort of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And there was an old what do you call it, a pit in the backyard that I had to fill in, so it's a nice little area though. It's a good little community as well, which I think you probably miss out on sometimes living in the suburbs. Yeah.
I mean, community is amazing. The very reason we're here today is community radio.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a very small place where you can make a very big impact, which I guess is also why you're here today. Now, it's usual that I do give some prior relationship to my guests, but you are by far the least known to me that I've ever had on the show so far.
Yeah.
But I really am so incredibly grateful and humbled that you placed so much faith in me to be here and share your story or bring it to air. So I understand that is such a privilege. And as I mentioned before, when we're talking about how people are feeling about life and their experiences, it is, it is quite a privileged space to be. So I thank you in advance and hope I do you justice.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I feel like I should apologise in advance as well. I lost my voice last week, so I hope it holds up this morning.
It will. I'll just throw you some extra mints or
Yeah,
something,
thanks.
Awesome. But so Friday morning, I had no idea this was going to unfurl as I turned up on site in Box Hill at the Icon construction site to deliver a toolbox talk for International Men's Health Week, instigated by Adam Lombard. He's the site manager. I think he's the site manager,
Yes.
project manager.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's important.
Yeah.
He's really important. And I walked in there and I had no idea. A room, I'm sure it was about 130 people. It looked like about 1,000 people sitting at tables. And it was like, just plonk yourself in the middle and off you go. Like I have a voice that projects. But for you turning up, I knew why I was turning up. Did you know why I was turning up?
No. And then to see you walk in with your, pink fluffy jacket on, which I commend as well, because I'd imagine there's a sense of pressure to try to look tough when you're addressing a union site toolbox as well. But you were just you, and you're awesome. So yeah, thank you so much for coming out. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really nice. I do love my pink vintage, and like to be a bit out. But thank you so much. I don't find it difficult turning up because I think, you reach a time in your life where the insides of you don't necessarily have to match the outsides of everybody else, and I love that about growing older. So when I started speaking, and then particularly about put your hand up if, because I think the first thing I said, I disclosed about my anxiety and depression, and I said, put your hand up if you've had that experience. And then I spoke about, postnatal or paternal postnatal depression in men. I said, put up your hand. And because I had to swivel around, because I had people at the back, to the side, to the front, you put your hand up. And I went, wow.
Well, I wasn't planning on putting my hand up, and I'd never even heard the term paternal postnatal depression before. And as you mentioned it, and as you were turning around, I thought, I reckon I went through that, and just, shot my hand up.
Did you hesitate at all? Like, was there something inside? Okay, cool.
No, I sort of, I've always worn my heart on my sleeve, I reckon. And yeah, like I said, I was realising what you were saying as I was putting my hand up, because that's probably the closest I've heard to an explanation as to, what I felt at the time. 13 years later, I've heard a term for it.
Wow.
Which I never heard before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think it is a thing.
Well, it definitely is, and later in the show we'll talk a little bit more about the neuroscience of it and what goes on in your brain. But I think the other powerful thing that happened, and this is the very reason I get up in the day to do what I do, because once we were all released and went out onto the site, and I was watching everyone sort of stream out, and so many guys just stopped and just shook my hand.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Didn't say a word, and I love that about men. They don't have to have all the words.
That's right.
But you went on site and somebody approached you.
Yeah. Just randomly, came up and he's like, oh, have you been through the ringer, have you? And I didn't know what he meant at first. I was like, hey, he goes, have you been, you've been through the ringer? I was like, oh, you mean about this morning? He goes, yeah. I said, oh, yeah, well, my wife had postnatal depression, and it was it was a hard time for us, and blah blah blah. So I sort of told him a bit about my experience, and then he told me all about his own experience with it. And like I said, we sort of chatted for a few minutes, and then had to get back to work. But then I saw him again the next morning, and I went up and I said, oh, I just want to I meant to see you again to say thanks for the chat yesterday. He goes, oh, no, we need more of it, old so-and-so is, going through it as well, and, all that sort of stuff. And then I even mentioned to the guy that I was working with yesterday, I said, oh, I'm going to be on the radio tomorrow, with Rae talking about men's mental health. And he's like, yeah, I go through a bit of depression sometimes too. So, there you go. That's another conversation that's happened, and we don't even know about other conversations that might have happened because of that. I think the industry is heading in the right direction. Not forcing men to speak publicly about it, but they're putting it at the forefront of our minds, and to the point that, hopefully more guys are asking, are you okay? That sort of thing. So it is important what you're doing, and, just spreading the word.
Well, I know the work that I do on the board of the Australian Men's Health Forum, and also on the board of Global Action on Men's Health. We place a lot of emphasis on mateship. In a world where we still don't have hardly any policy for men's health, or especially policy around men's mental health, it's impossible for me to go anywhere and say, I'll just reach out for help. Like, where? And, even as you unpack your story a bit later in the show, 13 years ago, you did not know what was happening with you, and nor would have anyone else around you, because we don't have the information. And this is not specifically, even though we're talking about a men's issue, this men's issue affects everybody. It affects women, it affects children. So, if you don't really care that much about men, care about their health, because it really does affect everybody.
Yeah, that's right. And that's with everyone. If one person in your community is affected, it has a snowball effect, and it affects everyone around them. Whether you're aware of it or not.
Well, how I landed in that room on Friday was through Adam Lombard, who's a friend with Matt Jones, who works in the scaffolding industry, and Matt Jones is a friend of Travis Strong, and Travis founded White Alpha Men's Health. That's a charity that I worked with for many years, where we raised money and awareness for the Australian Prostate Cancer Clinic here in Melbourne, and we did amazing work in just getting resources for men experiencing prostate cancer. And I had a conversation with Matt Jones in the room, probably about 7 years ago. That's why I was there, because one man told another man, told another man, and told another man. And now here you are telling men, and goodness knows how many people will be listening into this show today. So that, people, is how it works. All the money in the world is not going to change anything. Conversations, listening, having each other's back, you've got a good chance.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said.
It is that simple. Yeah. But you have 2 daughters.
Yeah, 2 incredible daughters.
Yeah.
Who keep me on my toes. I try to keep them on their toes, but I think, and I mentioned earlier, my oldest has my personality. The youngest has my wife's personality.
So what's your personality? How would you describe that?
My personality? Probably, I don't know, thoughtful, maybe too thoughtful sometimes. I overthink things.
Like your song selections for today?
Yeah, I was more worried about my songs than talking on the radio. That says a lot about me. My youngest daughter is, I suppose, defiant, like my wife, in a good way. I would not change anything about either of them. Yeah. So.
Yeah, how beautifully put.
Yeah.
We were also talking about teenagers, because your oldest being 13, right on, either in the throes of, or definitely on the precipice of falling into that. And you know, I'm very lucky. You know, my daughter's 29 and my second one's 26, and then Rory's 15. So I'm sort of in that at the moment. And yesterday we went to see Inside Out 2, and I was and we loved it, and we loved unpacking it together especially around anxiety and some of those emotions that can be challenging but are beautiful parts of growing up. And I reflected to him later. I said, this morning I walked into the bathroom, and on the bathroom window's drawn a penis. The word penis spelt, well, correctly, but it's also done in the reverse. So if you didn't see it full on, you saw it in the reverse from the other side of the window. And then on the other hand, he's looking at his school photo saying, I hate this, don't put this up, this is really terrible. On the other hand, he's taken me to Chanel yesterday to buy me perfume for my birthday, spent his whole pay packet on buying, you know, so you've got this whole kaleidoscope of stuff that's going on in your beautiful human being.
Yes.
And that's the first part of what we're talking about today, is showing your kids as much as you can and supporting them as they go through the single biggest change they will ever experience in their entire life, which is puberty.
Yeah. And that they don't always have to be in one basket. You know, they can change daily depending on the pressures that they're experiencing, and, you know, they can be in a great happy mood, you know, all week, and then just crash and burn by the end of the week, and that's okay, because that's, you know, that's human, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's hormones.
Yeah.
They keep us alive.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of what we're talking about today also is to do with hormones as well. What was it like for you growing up when you were sort of going through all that stuff?
I think I was more difficult than I thought I was.
That doesn't sound like a teenager at all.
No, you know, I hear stories of when I'd be in the shower, for instance, and someone would be turning the tap on and I'd be screaming, turn it off. And I'm like, I don't remember doing that. Was I really like that? But I was, I had a happy childhood. I had a happy upbringing. My family's been referred to as the Brady Bunch before, because we're all just happy-go-lucky people. But yeah, I've lost, you know, friends or relatives over the years, and it's, you know, things like that can sort of come back years later. You know, you don't really think of it at the time.
Lost them in?
Like passed away.
Yeah.
You know, like I wasn't really planning to talk about this, actually, sorry.
We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. So.
Oh, maybe I'll touch on it a bit later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. No, we can. That's, because I'm in charge. I can do whatever I like. I just change feet, but I think anyone that's listening in will have heard just the significance of what you said. You don't need the words. You don't need to tell the story to know that was something significant that happened to you. So
yeah. Well, I suppose it came about. I may as well. Years later, when my wife and I, before we were actually married, we were watching what's that show with Claudia Carvin, and her daughter dies in like the first...
The Sum of Us.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah.
And I was my wife, my fiance at the time, and I were watching that, and when her daughter died, I just lost it.
Yeah. Bawled
my eyes out in my wife's arms, and I was just weeping uncontrollably, and I was just like, you know, thinking of all these, you know, so it was like my best mate's mum who died years ago, you know, one of my sister's friends, and it was all just coming back to me, because I don't think I cried at the time.
Yeah.
And this just kind of, you know, triggered it, and it was amazing. It was a really good experience.
Wow.
For me, to be honest. Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing.
Yesterday I was listening to, do you know Blinkist? It's this new kind of place you can go to get really condensed versions of very dense books. And there was one on the human condition and how the human condition has grown, since the dawn of time. But it was talking about fiction and how we really rely on fiction, like movies and books and things like that, to emerge certain things from within us. And there's a real purpose for it. So what you're describing them, seeing a fictitious, Aussie drama that has triggered something inside of you that has released that grief. Which is, again, is one of the many beautiful human emotions that we have, is grief. That's often repressed in men and women. Stoic women here in Australia are just as hardcore as stoic men.
True.
That was a great series, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't watch the rest of it. As amazing as that experience was, that I needed it, I never went back to it. I couldn't watch it. Gosh. Again, I'm loving this show because I've got no idea what's going to come out of you. I know, sorry.
Please don't say sorry. But we're coming up to the first break, so we're going to find out a little bit more about you here.
Okay, cool, yep.
This is pretty exciting. So we come to the first break, and I prepare to play our very first special guest song request, which is based on a list personally selected by yourself, which you had a lot of trouble with. But I like to have a bit of fun and games by providing you with a cryptic clue to help you announce the first song. So I've mixed them up a little bit. So you've got to work out which one it is from your selection. And it could have something to do with the artist, the song, the title, even the lyrics. Who knows? Because I usually do this at about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, this is exciting.
So the first song... So you're going to tell me what it is and then you're going to tell me what it means to you.
Okay.
What would happen if you married a widow with an adult daughter, then your father marries the widow's daughter?
Well, I don't want to give away the end of the song because that's the clincher, but it would be Steve Goodman's I'm My Own Grandpa.
Correct.
I actually just gave away the end of the song.
But that is the song.
It is, yeah.
Now, and, what does that mean for you?
It's just a really funny song. It really gets me every time I hear it. And I kind of felt like, and this is one of the things I was stressing about my song selection, is that I didn't want too many downers, So I thought I'll, put in a bit of, comic relief. And it just, I wanted to, stick to the theme as well. So I suppose it's a man trying to figure out who he is in life.
Yeah.
Maybe,
And you have a distinct taste in music as well.
I do, yeah. I'm all country.
Does that come from somebody?
Well, interestingly enough, I think it's come from my dad, who got into blues music, loves blues music, and he got me into blues music. And blues music just ended up taking me down the path towards country music. I think it was just natural progression, like they both share the same roots. If you go back long enough, they're intertwined,
Wow.
Country artists, like Hank Williams he learnt to play guitar from, an old black man on the corner, that sort of thing. So, I think they go hand in hand, and I've just gravitated more towards the countryside.
Well, here goes, people. Get a taste of this. It's called I'm My Own Grandpa by Steve Goodman. Don't go away. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Oh, welcome back. The time is just 32 minutes past 10 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Dave Bamber. He's an accomplished tradesperson, husband, father, and I think he's got a bit of an entertainment streak in him somewhere because he's very confident on air for first time.
Yeah,
Are you sure that's true?
Yeah.
Sure you don't have your own radio show up in Cockatoo somewhere?
I've always thought about it. Always thought about having my own radio show.
Wow.
Playing, what sort of music would I be playing?
Well,
talking about
we
music.
know what sort of music you'd be,
exactly.
you'd be playing. Why don't you?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Do it. I'll make you a recommendation
Yeah.
so you can use this as your show reel.
Yeah, all right.
And off you go.
All right.
Such a great place to be. Again, big shout out to community radio. I was very lucky to be interviewed on another community radio station during the week. It was 94 point something in Geelong, The Pulse, I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And Leah Van Hoosen interviewed me about International Men's Health Week, surprisingly.
Right. Yeah.
And she was great. I was going to play it on my show today, replay that, and then you came along and had to sidebar that.
Oh, yeah, that's what you had planned until
Yes.
this last minute ring in.
Well, I thought I'll get you on for 10 minutes, and then that turned into maybe half an hour, and then it's like, nah, this is a whole show situation.
Yeah, well, that's what was awesome, and that's what I've told everyone that we were, chatting about. You asked if I'd be interested in phoning in, calling in on your show and telling my story, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe I will. I may as well. And then you were like, well, if you're anywhere near Box Hill, you're more than welcome to come and sit in on the show. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a bit of fun. You're like, yeah, it's really fun. Come in. I'm like, yeah, okay. And here I am. So it is. It's fun.
My dear peer, colleague, friend, Mike Hagan, who's a great friend for the show, and Mike does amazing work in the world with psychosocial hazard and risk in workplaces.
Oh, wow.
He's amazing. And he's such a great supporter of the show. And I can't remember what I was going to say about him now. But anyway, Mike, you're listening in. Hope you're enjoying the show. But yeah, he's got a great voice for radio. He doesn't think so because he's from the very, very north of England.
Oh, right.
So...
is he a Scouser?
No. That did come up on a radio show we did, and I think he takes great offence to that.
Okay,
so
sorry.
he's probably going to come and send it. No, he's the kindest man I know.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like being you today?
A roller coaster of emotions. I kept going through phases of being nervous about coming on the show, but then I was mostly excited. But I also feel like I've been given this opportunity, and it's my duty as a man to take it, because somebody should, and there should be somebody, talking about this. And just had a really nice drive in this morning. The sun was out, and had my tea in my travel mug with my honey. I love my honey. I'm a bit of a honey aficionado.
No.
Yep.
Comes up on the show every month.
Honey?
Yep.
Really?
Every month it comes up. Yep. Because it's a thing. We have to give a shout out. Ben Moore, Ben's Bees up the road from me. He provides me with my honey, my local honey.
Yeah, right.
And I stopped drinking alcohol a couple of years ago, and honey is my thing.
Wow, that's my thing too.
Yeah.
I love it.
Do you get it locally?
Yes, yeah. There's a little kiosk on the way to Gembrook, so in between Cockatoo and Gembrook, and it's the cutest little kiosk. You could walk in there, and it's there's all raw honey, eggs, jams, all that sort of thing. And there's there's an FPOS tap
and go.
Yeah, screen. So it's all the honor system. No one's actually there. You just punch in how much you're paying, and you tap your card, and you take your goods. Yeah. And it's it's the best honey. It's raw. Yeah. It's organic.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's medicinal.
Yeah.
Anyway, if we go off on this tangent, people go, can we find out about this other thing? But I'm so glad that, honey is a thing, because, again, it's makes us so happy. Now, when we left off, you shared about the conversation between you and the colleague on site after the toolbox talk. And then that you started thinking about your own experience and started drawing, I guess, the connections through to what I'd been speaking about, then what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Where I'd like to start with your story is going back to maybe just before you had kids and you were working as a as a carpenter.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep. Yep.
And that was the trade that you chose.
Yep. Yep.
And you mentioned meeting your beautiful wife Beck.
Yep.
And crying in her arms.
Yep. Yeah.
To Claudia Carvan.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, sort of how did things unfurl for you in terms of getting together and having children? And
so I'd just come home from living overseas. I was living in London for 2.5 years, and it turns out Beck was actually there at the same time I was, but we never crossed paths. And then I came home and...
Were you carpentering there?
Yes, I was, yeah. Yeah, it's really handy over there. There's like a recruitment agency that you can work for, and you can just travel. You just...
Yes.
Yeah, you give them notice and you take off and, travel around Europe, for a week or whatever. Then you come back to London and they put you on a job site. So I was working over there as a carpenter, and then, came home and met Beck, and within 6 months we were engaged. Within 12 months we were married, and I might have my timing wrong, but it's somewhere along these lines, and I think like within the next year we were having our first baby, which was perfect because we were both just at that stage in our lives when we were ready for that. We'd travelled and we were ready to come home and settle down, and we just met each other, and it was perfect. But I don't think either of us were really ready for a baby, and I hear people say that, like, no one's ever really ready for a baby. You can't be taught, you can't be told anything. You learn as you go, and you'll never really know until you do it. So we decided on it, and it was a planned pregnancy, and we were renting at the time as well, and Beck wasn't working leading up to the birth either, and then once we had our baby, it was a very traumatic birth, which neither of us were expecting, obviously. And as you mentioned earlier, you sort of you're in the middle of this situation. This is from my perspective, where it was like, birth is pretty gruesome. Really, there's nothing glamorous about it. And then afterwards you just get sent home. You can only have a night or two in the hospital, and then they just send you home, and so you go home. And fortunately for us, we had good family support. Although I think my mum and her mum were both respectfully, giving us our space, not realising that we were, really struggling, until we asked for help. And then, they were awesome. They were, came in, swooped in and saved the day. But I remember there was a night when my mum was over, and it was like the daytime was okay. This is my wife and I at home with our newborn, and I had a couple of weeks off work. So the days were fine. Would have, whatever, like, tummy time on the floor or whatever you do with the routine. Yeah, the routine. And but then I just remember, as the night was coming on, I just remember looking at each other with this look of terror in our eyes, because it was the darkness that was coming on, because we knew how tough the nights were, and it was like this dark cloud would just descend on the house, and then I remember my mum was over once, and she was, doing her thing, looking after our baby while we were doing other things, and then she'd sort of hand her back to me, and I'd be holding her, and then she'd start crying again, and I'd just quickly give her back to mum, because I was like, I can't do this, and I think that happens a lot as well, that young parents are just at home with this baby that they don't really know what they're doing.
Can I ask you about the pressure from the outside world that's celebrating the birth of your child, and the expectation is that you are joyful and happy, and this is, and it is the most amazing thing that can ever happen to you. And I think there's a real kind of chasm there where we can fall down, where we are happy and we do love our child, but the feeling is something else.
Yeah. And I remember after coming home from hospital, I had to put the message out that we've had our baby, we're all okay, but if everyone can just hold back, and we'll let you know when we're ready for visitors, that sort of thing, because we just weren't up for seeing people, and I felt bad doing that as well, because I know as a community, like your friends want to come and see your new baby and that sort of thing, but we just weren't up for it, so I had to ask everyone just to hold back a bit, and then you always couples who just take their babies everywhere with them, and they'll still go out for lunch with their with their newborn, and I remember seeing that and just thinking, God, I wish we could do that. I didn't feel like we had it in us to venture out into the world. So there is that kind of expectation of the early happy days of having a baby.
Were you and Beck alone with it together, or alone with it apart?
I think a bit of both. Like we were together in the terror of the night. Like we both feared the night, coming on. And no, I think we were together. We knew that we were both really struggling. I don't think either of us were, even for me, I think, she knew that I was struggling as well. So.
Were you having to go out to work?
Yeah. So I think I had a couple of weeks off, but then when it got really hard was when so we were renting, and I was working for a builder who wasn't paying my invoices, and I had an apprentice at the time as well, and we were falling behind on our bills and our rent. I think we were like a month behind on our rent, and I'd be waking up every morning feeling like my chest was about to explode. I'd be fumbling for my phone to check the bank account to see if the money was in, and it wasn't in morning after morning, and I'd nearly burst into tears, and then just have to get up and go to work anyway, because I didn't have anything. We didn't have any other options. I didn't have other work on, so I had to keep working for this builder. And then it just got to a point where we had to make the call, and I called my parents and asked if we could move home for a few months, just to help get back on our feet, and they took us in, and 6 months turned into 18 months, I think we were there, and Dad had retired as well, so he was home, which was great for Beck. Dad has this awesome aura, this real calming aura about him, you know, so it was great for Beck having him in the house all day, every day, you know, while I was working. But I honestly, you know, I look back and I think how lucky we were having that family to fall back on, that so many people out there don't have that. And I can just see how easily families can end up homeless because, you know, you go through a situation like that that's out of your hands, and you don't have any other options. You don't have any options, you know. So we were, very lucky. And we were able to live there while I was working and saved up for a deposit on our house. And that's when we were there until we bought the house in Cockatoo. We couldn't have done that without our family support, you know, so...
You know, for people that are listening in now, going, you know, I'm going through that, I've been through that, I might go through that. In retrospect, what would you have done differently, given that it's not a choice to go through those things? It's not dependent on how much you love your kid, how good a parent, how good a husband, how good a wife you are. These things just happen. What would you have done differently in preparation?
I would have gone on wages, you know. So I was self-employed at the time, you know, subcontracting, and I think there's also a pressure in young tradies, especially in the domestic, you know, residential industry, to run your own business, and run a successful business. And you see so many young tradies driving these huge new Ford Rangers with this huge tool trailer
on credit.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, I think if I had have in retrospect, I would have tried to go on wages, which I ended up doing, and that was the best thing I ever did, was to go on wages.
To take one pressure off.
Oh yeah, many pressures.
Yeah.
You can just, you go home at the end of the day and you be with your family. When you're out there self-employed, when you finish work, you then have to, chase more work. You have to do invoices, you have to do quoting, and you never really switch off. So I can't speak highly enough of just a good, job on wages. Even if you might be seeing less each week, but at the end of the day, it's worth it. It's
it's part of that bonding thing as well that you have to do. And my recent experience with my daughter giving birth to my granddaughter a year ago, and my granddaughter's dad, he's also a tradesperson, and he's just accepted a job on wages as well for exactly the same thing, because they've noticed that the stress has been taken out of their life, where they can have dinner together. They can actually have that time of not him having to, as you said, quote and invoice and chase work. It is a big pressure on the human condition, but more importantly, it takes you away from connecting into your family. And I think traditionally we would see, traditional masculinity would go out to work and it would not connect into the family in that way. But as evolution has occurred, now that's available, and it's, we can see the benefits of raising children with both parents being incredibly active and involved in that process. So without it, affects you and affects, your children. Yeah,
exactly. And even other things like this house that we bought in Cockatoo had termite damage. It was, we knew there were termites in it when we bought it, and we made the contract subject to treatment, so they had to get rid of the termites, but I was left with the damage. And I'm like, well, I'm a chippy, I can
And that's
I
an
could just-
expectation as well. You'll just fix that.
Yeah, exactly. But years later, it was worse than I thought, and because I was working as well, and then having to come home and fix the house, I feel like I missed out on a lot of, father, dad
Time.
as
Space.
well. That yeah.
We talk about time's on the clock, right? But space is something else. When you have space to move around with a developing thing, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
What sort of symptoms can you remember experiencing that were outside of what you'd ever felt before?
Yeah, I think as in like anxiety, like
Well, anything, your feelings of joy as well.
Yeah.
When they're all mixed in together. I'm going from the movie yesterday where
Yeah,
there's this
yeah.
whole, cacophony
Joy.
of things going off
Yeah,
all at once,
yeah.
and you can't quite capture yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's what used to get me down as well. Was we'd have this amazing moment, with our newborn, or with our baby, who we might have something happens during the day, like she, when she first rolls over or something like that, and it's this really happy moment, and then there was just this crash afterwards, like later in the night, it all goes downhill, and I was left thinking, oh, come on, like we just had this really happy moment, and now we're down in the pit again.
Yeah.
But I think that's having kids anyway. It's always a bit of a roller coaster.
Well, yes, but the moment's the moment, and some of the things that you've illustrated today, all the extra pressures on top of that can be the very thing that can undo you or take on other attributes, like you mentioned, anxiety. Anxiety and stress, two very different things.
Yeah,
Stress is a normal reaction to life, whereas if you pull your rubber band too far, not getting paid, sleepless nights, over plus the hormone, and we'll talk about the hormone changes later, bang.
Yeah.
So if you take some of those risk factors out, then, and your advice to people that are phoning in, sorry, they're not phoning in at all, they're listening in, that you might consider before you have children to look at some of these risk factors first to reduce those pressures in your life before, because it's very unknown. I mean, parenting is unknown. Full stop, even when your children are grown adults. I have a son living in London at the moment as well, and that feeling of just not having that proximity is something to get used to.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's a lifelong thing, isn't it?
It is. But gosh, we could go for a long time speaking about this, but in sort of summing up that part, what was the piece? You mentioned your parents were able to come in and support you. Now, this isn't a judgmental question. It's just a curiosity question. What took you so long to ask for help, or why?
Probably the I don't know. I don't know if it's the expectation of happiness that, like I said earlier, you sort of expected this to be such a happy time of your life, that you're still trying to find those happy moments at the time.
And show that to the world.
Yeah.
So it's a pride thing?
Yeah, probably. Like we don't have a lot of photos from that time as well, which I regret. I see a lot of families who have these, lovely photos of, the mum and the baby and that sort of thing. And yeah, we didn't really want to take photos of ourselves at the time. And yeah, I think it's also, it takes a moment to realise that you need help as well. It probably is human nature to try to do it yourself first. before you realise that you need help. And then there's that period of once you realise that you need help, building up the courage to actually ask for help as well. But yeah, it's the best thing we ever did was ask for help.
Yeah.
And I love the saying as well that it takes a community to raise a child. And you see that in other cultures.
Yeah.
There's like multiple generations under the one roof.
Oh, yeah.
How good would that be?
Yeah. In fact, I wrote an article for Men's Health Week about purpose and responsibility in boys, and if we don't raise them with purpose and responsibility, they can become quite lost in things. And but many parents will tend to, oh no, don't make them do the ironing or the washing or anything like that, do that because it serves them very well. And anyway, somebody chimed in on one of my social media posts to say, they must have done research on me to find out I'm a single parent, and you've made no mention of the father, and and these single mothers, they can't be everything, and the kids need more than just these single mothers who whatever. Anyway, it's quite disparaging, and a few people chimed in to defend my honour, and of course I mentioned that my kids have amazing dad and who plays 100% amazing role in raising Rory in particular. And I said, but I should have mentioned the aunties, the uncles, the sisters, the brothers, and all of those other people who also help raise Rory, because they do.
100%.
They do. And I'm about to take him overseas to the UK where his grandparents live in Burnley, which is up the north of England.
Yeah.
And I take him there every few years, or when I can, when COVID's not happening, to spend time with them, because they play a role. Just because they live across the other side of the world doesn't mean they can't play a role in his upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good for them to see all aspects of where they come from.
Yeah.
Because I reckon it's interesting, within families you see similarities kind of across the tree, of a kid might be a dead ringer of an uncle from a couple of generations ago, and it's great to see that for them especially, I think.
Well, when he was picking apart his school photo yesterday, I mentioned because his father's from England, but we have German, we have Jewish descent, he says, how can I have German and Jewish descent? Well, that make me a target. What's going on there,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, look, you've got some Scottish, some Irish, being Australian, you've got a bit of everything. So, but, he's curious about where he comes from.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
As well. So we're a bit over time in going to our next break. But again, thank you in advance and in retrospect of what you've already delivered to us as well. But your wife, Beck, when you were talking to her about coming on the show, she was great in doing her due diligence as well. She wasn't just going to throw you out there and,
that's right.
and not be safe, which is such a beautiful thing for a partner to do. But, there were some things that you discussed about different approaches to men's health as well, that, there's a very big difference between men's rights activists and people like me who work in men's health to include everybody in the outcomes of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, Beck's awesome. She's always had my back in everything, every venture that I've gone into, she's always supported me, and always had my back. And like you said, and that's what I love about her. She does her due diligence, and she's a good researcher. So yeah, no, she's good.
That's great.
Yeah, so you got her tick of approval.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Beck. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about parental postnatal depression and some of the more neurological reasons why that can happen, and some of the great resources that have emerged over the years. But also, you've got a lot to talk about healthy eating, things, the way that, as you've moved into your 40s, can I say that?
Yes, yeah, please do.
how you're getting this lens on yourself and your own health and taking responsibility for, we mentioned honey before. I have it every morning because it ignites my dopamine, bang, oxytocin, bang. It's just so cool. But some ideas about how you've adjusted things in yourself. Also, something that came up for me recently when I was speaking at the Future of Construction conference in Brisbane and then at the Health and Safety conference here in Melbourne was pain, physical pain, particularly within the construction industry of typically men who've spent a lot of time on the tools as young men and then growing into, more senior years, still have to continue doing the same level of physical activity with chronic pain, and how that works. So a lot to talk about. We've only got 59 minutes to do it in. Now, you're pretty excited because we're at our next very special guest song request, Dave. Are you ready for the cryptic clue?
Absolutely.
This is an industry. I read this and go, what was going in your head, Ray? The engineered substance that causes silicosis. Now, remember, it's got something to do with the title of the song, the artist, or the lyrics.
Yes, that would be Sam Stone.
Yes.
By John Prine. John Prine is my absolute favourite.
Yeah.
Yes, I wept when he died.
Oh.
Wept in the shower.
Why? I mean,
I just gotten so into him in the couple of years leading up to him dying, and I saw him live. It's amazing that I got to see him live.
Yeah. Did he die as an old man?
Yeah, and it was COVID related, and he was due to come out to Australia again.
Yeah,
and Dad and I had really good seats to see him,
yeah.
But that didn't happen. But he just really speaks to me, John Prine, with his lyrics. He's just got incredible. They're so simple, simplistic, but poetic.
Yeah.
Lyrics, and they're so real as well. Like he was just a regular guy. He was a mailman who just they used to call him the singing postman.
Wow.
So yeah.
From what country?
America.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Everyone, get on your Googles, do your research on John Prine. I'm going to do that a little bit as well. So, without further ado, here is Sam Stone by the recently departed John Prine. Don't go away. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Oh, there it is. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC and you're with Rae Bonney. I'm joined by David Bamber. He's speaking with us today about his experience of paternal postnatal depression, but really it's about everything to do with Dave Bamber so far. We're doing well. We're getting across the interesting spectrum that is you.
Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying it.
Now, you come from somewhere, and you've mentioned your dad already, and he sounds like a pretty cool man.
Yeah.
And your mum. What brought them together?
Childhood sweethearts. They got together when they were 16, I think.
Yeah.
And have obviously been together ever since. So Mum is now retired, but she was a secretary at primary school, and she was a pillar of the community as well. Like, so many people relied on her for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So both pretty strong individuals. And I've got a older sister and a younger brother. So yeah, like I said, we used to be called the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, just missing 3 kids.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I've had a happy upbringing. So
yeah,
very lucky.
What did your dad pass on to you about dadding?
Patience is probably the main thing. I don't think he's ever raised his voice at us. We used to we laugh about his drop face. That's what we call it when he gets
disappointed,
angry or disappointed. His face drops, and that just broke us.
Yeah,
We're like, oh no, we disappointed him.
Yeah,
and that's all it took. So that's probably something that I've tried to keep in my parenting. Not very successfully. I tend to, well, not anymore, but over the years I've yelled at my girls a fair bit, I think.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where it didn't really make a difference, so I stopped yelling.
Yeah. Yelling, smacking, none of it really works, does it? But the face does. The face does work. The look of disappointment.
And the patience works. Just be patient and understand what they're going through. That's what I'm learning the most, I think, about being a parent.
It's not your job to make your kids into who you want them to be. It's our job to help them into who they already are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I used to say about my younger one that her and I used to clash a fair bit, and I used to say it was like a unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. And whichever one I was, I used to think I was the immovable object, but I was the one who ended up giving way every time. So the unstoppable force always wins.
Did you ever have to resort to your parents' method of turning off the hot water when they're in the shower, like that one?
Yeah, there was once when I had her in the shower and I was about to just turn the cold water on, and I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I backed out. I lost that one as well.
The things that we do to our children in terms of what we think is good discipline. Yeah. George, who lives in London now, maybe even spoken about this on the show, but I used to punish him with porridge because he hated it.
Oh, wow.
Hated porridge. So I'd make him up a bowl of porridge and he'd have to eat it, and if he didn't, it would go into the fridge. And it would come out again, and he wasn't allowed to heat it.
Oh my God!
Until it was all gone. And he rang me earlier this year to say, "Guess what, Mum? I'm in this English cafe or something eating porridge. It's really nice."
Oh, are you kidding me?
He said it's nice because it's warm.
Oh.
Oh dear.
Oh, there you go.
Well, look, he's turned out really well.
Oh,
so,
that's gold.
Yeah. But going back into the highlight of our show around paternal postnatal depression, it is a real thing. Anyone that's listening, Google it. There's enough there, and there's enough research to talk about how it really does affect about 1 in 10 men, which is a lot when you consider how many children are being born, but it's often unrecognised, undiagnosed and misunderstood as behaviour. And we all know those kinds of behaviours. And if we look at those sort of traditional sort of family norms that, dad goes to work, mum stays at home. And, as we're seeing evolution's changing a lot of that now where, for women as well, it's now no longer, a crime to go to work and be a mother at the same time. I think that's amazing. But by the same token, if a mother wants to stay at home and look after children full time, that should also be okay. Or if a dad wants to do that, however you design your family, it should be okay.
Absolutely.
But, if a man is not coping when a child is born, it's just seen as not coping. We're not inquiring as to why that's happening, or that consideration of the pre-planning part of if this happens. We look at postnatal depression in women, which is pretty terrible. However, we have so much research, we have so much support, literature. Women are often spoken to about postnatal depression upon conception of a child all the way through. And then, after the birth, when you're at the maternal healthcare centre, which really should be called the antenatal. It's not very inclusive, really, is it?
Yeah, I know you're right.
Everyone should be considered in that conversation.
Yeah.
So, but some of the common symptoms, irritability, not bonding, not sleeping, that can lead to, even drinking problems or substance misuse to help through those very long nights as well, can lead to isolation. And, you know, when you were talking before about that dignity and pride thing, and even though you're raised in this amazing, loving, inclusive family, you know, your sense of pride might not have wanted to burden them with this problem you really should sort out for yourself. Was that kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we get around that? Because, I mean, that again is biology itself, in that, you know, I think men are designed to risk their lives to protect, and women are designed to risk their lives to create. I think that's kind of a bit of a given. And some of those things that happen, those neurochemical factors such as changes in vasopressin and oxytocin. And vasopressin is kind of a hormone or a peptide. I'm not going to get too much into the neuroscience, but if that is too low or your oxytocin's too low, you're not going to feel that. That vasopressin might help you bond, you know, sexually, and also, you know, with your babies in terms of love and affection and things like that. So if that's missing, guess what? You're not going to be bonding. If your oxytocin or your testosterone is messed up, guess what? You're going to feel pretty terrible. And that's not because, you know, in your situation, you know, your bills aren't being paid or you've got financial pressures. That's part of it. But there's also another underlying thing going on as well that we need to be addressing, and going and speaking to a GP that actually understands this could be a good starting point to be able to lift some of those happiness hormones that we have, like through honey.
Yes.
Back on that one again.
Yeah.
Honey, the elixir of life.
Yeah. What's interesting because, that is interesting because, I feel like there's also an aspect of what about me with young dads after having a baby, and they have to take the back seat, and after going, you know, from, you know, being the number one in their wife's life, to number two, and all of a sudden, you know, we're not having the, you know, the physical affection, the intimacy, and it's not just men, like we all like to feel special, you know.
All people like to feel prioritised, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think it would help to have that the chemical side of it explained, as you said, to help explain what we're feeling as well.
Because it can be so confusing, and I see this a lot at the menopause end as well. It's very similar in that we have literally no real information about menopause. So women have no idea. Quite often a woman won't even have prepared herself for menopause, let alone not know what's going on. And then, of course, things like intimacy are affected, and, you know, that can really be very damaging to one's confidence and your intimacy in your relationship as well. You know, men will come to me and go, oh my gosh, my wife doesn't love me anymore. She's lost interest in me. And they don't know what to do. And then the woman on the other side is going, oh my God, what's happening to me?
Yeah.
No one's telling me. And they feel so isolated and alone. And, you know, it wasn't until just right at this moment that you can see there's a lot of similarity between those two occasions in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of those neurochemical things, that vasopressin, it's a neuropeptide that should increase in fathers after childbirth. So that increases your ability to connect, and similar to the oxytocin that increases in mothers for that very reason of connection and bonding. But it also plays an important role in improving the that parent-child bond for everyone. So it's all sort of moving around. But fathers with low levels of vasopressin or vasopressin are supposed to have difficulties in parental behaviours and greater vulnerability to depression. And there's also a link between paternal postnatal depression and changes in prolactin levels in fathers, which causes difficulties in adapting to parenthood and therefore greater susceptibility to things like depression. So there's more than 1 or 10 things going on at a time. So it would make sense that fathers as well as mothers are prioritised to understand what the impacts are of having a baby.
Yeah. And I think it would be helpful getting that knowledge out there, knowing that there might actually be a chemical explanation for feeling down or feeling despondent or separated or separate. And it's not just a failure in ourselves.
No. But all the comorbid things as well, which are the things that go to the side of it. So if that was one thing, the other thing is, the pressures of life. Then you've got the life changes. On top of that, you may have had an experience of yours, like when you're literally looking at your wife when she's giving birth and you're terrified, and it's traumatic to see a human being that you love in that much pain. And then not all births, even though we live in the world that we do, not always go according to plan and can be quite traumatizing. So we have that as well on top. Many men that I work with as well, and this is for women as well, but I think about 3% of the world's population live with obsessive compulsive disorder. And so you have obsessive compulsive disorder, which pretty much is very difficult to function, and obsessive compulsive behaviours, which is, oh gosh, I just love to have all the knives lined up and the pictures straight, and that can be helpful in life. But I work with so many men with obsessive compulsive disorder. One in particular at the moment, he read an article about white-tailed spiders being on the loose in Victoria at the moment. So all he can see in the night time is all these white-tailed spiders coming and killing his children.
You're kidding me. Gee.
And that's where obsessive compulsive disorder, that's not, people go, oh, that's hilarious. It's not actually, because for this person, he can't sleep, he can't eat. He lives with this in his mind all the time. So you put that on top, given the prevalence of OCD, and you've got so many things that are going on at once. However, if you could talk about those to somebody who understood, who didn't judge you, who didn't try and fix you, but just listened, there's a chance to create space and preserve someone's dignity and pride and self-respect as they move through those challenging times.
Yeah, it's just being heard sometimes, isn't it? And it can just, you don't even have to have a response or an answer, but just to get that off your chest, and for someone to listen. But yeah, I think GPs are important.
Do you have a good GP yourself?
We have an amazing GP.
Oh, you'd have a family one, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we do. And you know what? Because we've all had colds over the last couple of weeks, and he's told us he suggested honey, and I was like, oh yeah, I know about honey. He goes, real honey? I said, oh yeah. Real honey is so he's into honey as well, so it's perfect. But yeah, we got a good little family GP. I think they're really important.
Has this family GP been involved in your lives since you were little, or?
No, only in the last couple of years, I think.
Okay.
He came to Cockatoo.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's amazing. And yeah, I think they're important because they can help you understand what you're going through, and that there are options, that can help. Especially a good one who doesn't, just automatically prescribe medication.
So dangerous.
Yeah. I remember even when I was younger and I was I played a lot of sport, and I was grinding my teeth at the time, and Mum took me to our dentist to be fitted for a mouth guard or something like that, and he started asking about my lifestyle, about, you know, and so Mum's like, oh, well, he plays, you know, 2 lots of football, basketball, swimming, you know, training, like all these things, and so the dentist actually suggested that I cut out a couple of my activities throughout the week, that it might be stress that's causing me to grind my teeth. He said, you know, try that and see how that goes, and then after that, maybe we'll talk about a mouth guard or something like that. So he didn't jump in straight away and fit me for a mouth guard. He, you know, sort of stepped back and had a look at that, and so I did that, and I think it fixed the issue.
Wow.
Just cutting a couple of things out of my life.
And it's such a perfect example of somebody looking at all of the information and not trying to fix something rather than try and understand something. And I say often to people, listen to understand, don't listen to react. Because when you try and understand something, you can see this pattern forming to go, you're doing that many activities? That's a lot. You must have been an exhausted young man.
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's something that you don't.
Good on your
you don't think
dentist.
of. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Love dentists. Dentists have very high suicide rates. Very high.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. I personally think it's because nobody visits the dentist without terror. So most people that come to see you don't want to see you.
Yeah, true.
And you don't get to really have a conversation either, because it's, you know, you do all the talking and there's
Yeah. And then your patient just wants to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and it's really expensive, and no one can really understand why you're charging so much money just to do something that they don't want you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's a lot of kind of social and personal impacts that happen to dentists.
Oh, poor dentists.
Yeah, but it's good to have a good dentist, good to have a good GP. But I think some of the other things that we've sort of touched on that really affect not just men but women also, who might be experiencing challenges when, you know, their beautiful child is born, is those social and cultural pressures that we have. Now, when we live in this really sanitized world, everyone's objective should be just for happiness. We just have to be happy, and if we're not happy, medicate it.
Yeah.
And we forget about all of the other amazing emotions like anger and I'm going back to Inside Out again yesterday. I was going to say disgust, and I hadn't thought about that as an emotion until yesterday, really. But all the things that happen inside us, that we're celebrating all of those emotions safely. But in a world where we can only be happy is very isolating. Because the expectation, again, when you have a baby, is that you must be overjoyed. And you have to paint that picture. And so you and Beck saying, hey, we don't want to see people for a little bit, great decision to make, because you can just adjust. However, then does that also isolate you, because you don't want to be showing people the reality of what you're feeling like?
Yeah, true.
You know, because the having people over who didn't expect tea, coffee, and are bringing you bunches of flowers that now you've got to put in vases that you don't have, and stuff like that. But if you just had people who turned up just to be there and hold the baby while you have a shower or something like that, why couldn't that be okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we definitely did it a lot better with our second.
Yeah, what did you do differently?
Yeah, just opened ourselves up, had more people over, and had the, I don't know, I suppose we're sort of set up
with your termites.
Well, yeah, with the termites. Yeah. Set up with that support. You know, we knew to ask for help. We knew to have the people over and you know, get out of the house and you know, having a toddler helping with
I was
the
just
baby
going to
as
say
well
that.
was amazing. You know, helping us helping us, give her a bath and that sort of thing.
Especially if she's an empath like you, she probably would have been
Loved it.
super helpful.
Yep. And a real perfectionist as well. So helped with like laying out the blankets and that sort of thing. And so it was awesome. Yeah.
So my mention of OCD resonated with you as well.
Yeah.
Did I just open another lid for you? Well, that'll be another show.
Another thing, yeah.
Yes.
After the honey show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ben Moore, Ben's Bees, he also has an honesty box, but his is a lot more honest than yours in that it's just you just put cash in a box, but people don't honour that all the time.
Yeah.
And, he would prefer to be supporting his community than worrying about the money, but still, it is amazing. Now, oh gosh, look at the time. We've only got half an hour left, and I haven't even talked about the great resources that for men, women, anyone, children who are listening in, worried about anyone. Some resources that I found when I was doing a bit of a deep dive into paternal postnatal depression. SMS for dads. It's for fathers, dads-to-be, families and health professionals. You can receive free text messages, support, info and tips. So if you just Google SMS for dads, that's the number 4. I'll put this in the show notes when I produce the show as well, so people can look it up. Another one is Dad Space. That's capital D for dad, and then AD space, capital S for space. It's mental, emotional, and practical support for expectant and new dads. That's got some really great resources. And dadsgroup.org is a dads group. So it's a bunch of dads supporting dads.
Awesome.
So we've come a long way with resources like that. So.
And I love that SMS for dads. That's a great idea because we're in the age of texting.
Yeah.
Now you send more text messages than you do call people these days, and it's and for something like that, I think it'd be so much easier, for a bloke just to send a text message about how he's feeling and get a text response with help.
Yeah. Imagine that. You're just sitting on the couch and it's the middle of the night and you text and you go, what's happening? They go, oh, it's not you, it's your hormones. You go, oh, cool. It's not me at all.
Awesome. All right.
Off we go.
I can go to sleep now. That's a great idea.
So we whittled down to your third special guest song request, Dave.
Yes.
So it should be getting a bit easier. And you're going to get this one straight away. The clue is chronic pain and substance misuse, in brackets, spina bifida.
Oh, yes. Good old Hank Williams and Ramblin' Man.
Yeah. Tell us about your connection through to that.
It just speaks to that. I think there's that little part in all of us that just wants to get the hell out of Dodge. Sometimes, it's just that restlessness in us. This is all about just, a man who just wants to hop on a train and just, take off across the land. Yeah, it's really cool. And it's the coolest sounding song of all time, I reckon.
Yeah. It's done by many other artists as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a few covers out there.
Yeah, but it's a really, really good version.
Yeah.
So without further ado, don't go away, folks. We'll be right back for the last segment. We're going to just wrap things up, talk about what's coming up next on the show in July, which feeds in very nicely to today's show, magically. So we'll be right back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Well, there you have it. Hank Williams and Ramblin' Man. Now, good old Hank, in the cryptic clue, he was born with spina bifida and lived a life of chronic pain, and which led to him using alcohol to manage that, but was seen sort of as an alcoholic and not taking into account where that came from. See that a lot in your industry in construction? Like we talked about pain before, chronic pain.
Yeah, there is. And what's worrying actually is seeing it in younger guys as well. It's a bit shocking actually how many younger guys I know who complain about having a sore back.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be having a sore back at your age. I do. I'll be 41 this week, and I'm starting to feel it a bit in my knees and in my back. I actually just recently got a one of those little orthopedic pillows that you put in between your knees when you sleep.
Yeah.
And that's made a huge difference on my back. Because I was a few weeks ago now, and I just had a really, just out of nowhere, I sort of crept up on me a bit actually, but I got to a point I was in a lot of pain at work just walking around in my back, and I just had to think about it. I thought about seeing a doctor, but I was having a real think about it, and I was thinking about the way I sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm on my side with one of my knees pulled right up, and so I'm sort of twisted.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of a Google. I was looking into that, and I saw these orthopedic pillows and was reading about them, and they're good for
Alignment.
side sleepers because they keep your spine aligned. And so I got one of them, and I think it's actually fixed me.
There you go. Anyone that's listening in, get yourself. Where do you get these orthopedic pillows from?
Oh, just online.
Could you just do one yourself? Can you just shove anything between your legs?
Well, that's what I did. I initially just put a cushion in between my knees. You don't have to go out and get anything official, but it made a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, recently when I was speaking at the workplace mental health conference here in Melbourne, I was facilitating a panel, and one of the panelists, Dr. Helen Lingard, she's a professor at RMIT who does just research into construction industry and pain. And it really opened my eyes to this issue though, where no one's ever addressed. And there's a whole bunch of programs and tools that she's developing and designing through this research that will eventually end up on site, so we can get a bit ahead of the curve. But it's amazing people doing stuff in the world, isn't there? I just love it. And next month, when I'm back on air on the 21st of July, I was going to mention this in a minute, but I might as well fast forward it. But I'm meeting with a very special international guest. We'll be doing it remotely. He's all the way from Manchester in the UK, Dr. Robin Hadley. And we met last year in December at the Men's Health World Congress in Borneo. And I was speaking about the state of men's health in the Australian construction industry from data that I've collected over the years. But he really blew my mind with a men's health issue I'd not ever considered, and that is fatherlessness. He's a social gerontologist and has a really cool history, but he found passion in the phenomenon of involuntary childlessness in ageing men through his own experience, and then has just dedicated his life to it. But the impacts on mental health, physical health, lifespan of men, something we rarely think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I was conscious of coming in here today as well, obviously wanting to share my experiences, which has been all around having kids and having a wife, but not wanting to neglect the guys out there who don't have kids or a wife, because as I mentioned earlier as well, there is that what about me aspect in all of us that we all want to feel special. So it is across the board.
If there's somebody listening in that's never felt special, just say they were raised not in a family like yours, and maybe didn't have a family, have never partnered, and where do they go? I guess that's part of the reason why I work in men's health so much is because I mentioned before about investment in men's health. There's relatively little in the world. I think our recent federal budget turned up about 160 billion for women's health and about 11 million for men, which is just
right.
If you consider things like men occupy all the workplace deaths, suicide, road deaths, military deaths, cancer, men trump cancer, go on and on and on. There's a real issue with men's health and how we're investing in it, because again, it affects women. Even HPV, which is the human papillomavirus, which can end up in cancer. Around the world, females receive that vaccine. And here in Australia, we've been vaccinating boys and girls for many, many years now. But in the rest of the world, that really doesn't happen, because countries won't invest in that vaccination because it typically will affect women, so why invest in boys? But the fact is that because it's a transmittable disease, if you vaccinate boys, it's actually going to protect women from those cancers. So, everything we're doing about people will affect other people, other genders, other, variations of the human condition. So we need to invest in all of it to make a difference. That was a bit of a rant, wasn't it?
That's good.
But do you know what? When I was in Borneo, I was very lucky to go there. I went and stayed in a tree house in a jungle for 3 days just to tap out, get away from it all. And it was a very amazing experience. But I went to visit one of the very ancient villages there in Borneo, and they have stingless bees there. And I got some of their honey, which is just it doesn't even represent honey. It's almost like it's a liquid. Yeah. Almost, and it tastes. The first sample of it, you'd think you were having vinegar, until you experience the whole piece, and then it's just this. It's medicine. Wow. It's medicine.
Where was this? In Borneo.
Borneo, yeah. Which is Borneo is Malaysia. Well, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia.
Yeah,
all in one. Off the coast of Malaysia.
All right, that's on my list now. Places to go.
Yeah, no, it's really. I'll give you the tree house that I stayed in.
Cool.
But it's funny I love nothing more than travelling. Health and safety in Victoria, we are the nanostate for a reason. We have so many levers here for it. But you go anywhere else in the world and you have to be very, very mindful that there is no place on earth that addresses health and safety like we do. So you're not necessarily safe. So I'm in this tree house on stilts in the middle of a jungle. And night time that's going like this. This was like, oh my goodness, will I be okay?
And I bet you didn't have a hard hat on either.
No, not at all.
Oh my God.
Not at all. But, in your experience again of Friday, of just literally going out, having one conversation with a man that you thought to tell me about, that's led to this, that's led to that will lead to change. If it's only one person, but I'm sure it will be more. I go back to that whole, are we doing enough and how are we doing things? So if so many charities are continuing to raise money to make change, or we're doing a push-up challenge, or we're running a marathon, I'm not entirely sure in the mental health space whether that really resonates. And that wasn't a question. It was more that I think we've got to be thinking more about, yes, money is great for research. Money is great for creating resources. But we need to know what we need before we do that. And, having conversations don't cost money. But having conversations about research, that would have cost money, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose... one thing resources can help with is setting up things like this SMS for men.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. And, with like a funding for men's health, most of those things are set up on the smell of an oily rag. So if you can imagine if there was, some more investment, like even at the Australian Men's Health Forum, we get such minimal funding to be the peak body for men's health here in Australia.
Yeah.
And I won't talk about that because that's a little bit political. But what I will talk about before I forget is that I understand that you and I have covered a lot of ground today. And if any of our discussions have brought up uncomfortable feelings for listeners, please remember help is there. Here's a few options for further support here in Australia. Lifeline, the number there is 131114. That's 131114. Suicide callback service is 1300 659 467. And emergency services is 000. You watch a lot of American television, you might accidentally dial 999. I think it has been done. But emergency services are there for an emergency. So if it's an emergency, dial and they will sort it out. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. But don't ever hesitate to reach out for help because you think you're being a burden or it's not really a crisis. If it feels like it for you or if you're observing something that looks like it for somebody else, just give it a go.
And I don't really know, but I'd imagine the people working in those sectors, hotlines and things like that, they would be doing it because they care. Like, there'd have to be an element of empathy to be doing that sort of work. Yeah. Like you wouldn't just be doing it for the money, for the pay or whatever it is.
Well, Lifeline's pretty voluntary, so would be no money involved in that.
Well, there you go. So you would be talking to someone who cares.
Yeah. And you know what? We don't always connect with others. So I'm a Lifeline counsellor. I've not done it for many, many years, but the training, amazing. But if you ring and you don't connect with the person who's on the other end of the call, hang up and try again. Because it's okay not to connect with somebody. It's okay not to like their approach, but don't persevere with it. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. It's like connecting with a GP or a dentist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. If it doesn't feel right, it's really expensive, but don't give up. Probably I think, when, obviously I'm a therapist myself, and I would always spend a good, 20 minutes on the phone to a new client before I engage with them because I might not have a connection. And my methodology is a little unconventional. That might not suit you. So why would you waste your time and money and, most importantly, your motivation for help if it's not going to work for you? Yeah,
and you're right. And because even health professionals are individuals as well.
Yeah.
So they're going to be different, and it's the same with GPs. The difference between two GPs can be completely different, even though they might have the same training, but they're two completely different people. So you might connect with one and not with another. So I think you're right. I think that shopping around for a connection is a good advice.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. You're not being disrespectful. It's about, because human beings, we're chemical beings. And, you look at your mum and dad, they connected as teenagers and they're still together. That probably was one of those true chemical connections where all the planets aligned or whatever, all the chemistry aligned and they match.
Yeah.
And what do you think the secret to their success is? And they're listening in, so be careful.
I think probably again patience and understanding. I remember what my dad said at my mum's 60th was that the best thing he could think to say about her is that she's the nicest person he's ever known. And that was it. Just, that's how simple it is, I think.
Wow. She probably already knew that because it sounds like he probably would have told her that.
Yeah.
But that is,
But, that's
really cool.
Pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful too.
Yeah, yeah. With coming on the show today and, your family probably listening in, did anyone sort of have any questions for you about what they didn't know this part of you?
Yeah, I think they were, since I mentioned that I was coming on the radio to talk about men's mental health, and in particular paternal postnatal depression. I think they were worried that I was going through something that they didn't know about. But I'm sure that they knew, because I feel like I talked about it at the time, but none of us really knew about anything like paternal postnatal depression. And if that's what it was, then we didn't know it. But they knew that I was struggling, and especially with work and all that sort of thing. So, if they're worried that they weren't there for me, they absolutely were. I feel like I was open enough with everyone in my life that, asking for help and admitting that we were struggling. But like I said, we've never heard the term paternal postnatal depression before, and I don't know for certain if that's what I actually had or not, but it resonated with
That's right.
me when you said
we have
it.
these labels, don't we?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
labels are there to help us understand something, not necessarily nail ourselves to a diagnosis. It's like watching Inside Out yesterday, and this, oh my God, that the producers didn't get it right, or they didn't get the story right, or they could have done this or done. It's our job as consumers of news and information to take that information and apply it to ourselves. It's not our job to take it literally and pull it apart and work out what doesn't work for us, because we all have a whole kaleidoscopic experience of life, and how could any two be the same? So you're never going to apply it the same.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You just need that idea of how to do it.
Yeah.
So up next we have, I'm just really segued then because I saw the beautiful Paula Hogg come into Studio One, and she's rolling out an entire lazy, because I sound all really Australian now, Sunday afternoon of music and banter bound to get you relaxed. It seriously is. So she's just came into Studio One. So for our final special guest song request, Dave, I'm pretty sure you don't need the clue. So instead, I'll get you to intro the song as your final job on the show today.
Well, this one coming up is, I think, it's a bit of an anthem for men everywhere. Man in Black by Johnny Cash. And I think it's about men who, feel they have the weight of the world on their shoulders and may feel like they have to represent other men, which I feel like I might be doing here today. So this might be my anthem.
Well, you certainly have. And thank you for being so thoughtful about the music you've chosen, and, to be able to again punctuate what we're saying today through those stories. So there's no words to describe what you've so selflessly shared, not only on Friday, but with the world today, because I can only imagine that the impact is exponential. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me and for all the work you do. It's amazing. It's really important. And on behalf of men everywhere, I really appreciate the work you do.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Promised I wouldn't cry on the show, but anyway, there's still time. So thank you, everybody. Take care, and we'll be back on the 21st of July. Be safe.